much time. I tried to do this stream earlier, but we lost power, so here we go. This is regarding the Father Damian Zablocki case, and the title of the video is Slander Kills 3 Souls. We're going to break off into the testimony and into the canonical violations that are there implied with the following quote: "Slander kills 3 souls, the speakers, the listeners, and the one accused, if he does not forgive." Now, this is from a Cleopa, whom the Orthodox tradition considers a saint, but this is not a person that is officially recognized as a saint in the Roman Catholic Church. So let's go straight into testimony. This is Gretchen Butzman. It says here, Gretchen Butzman, here's her name, May 29th, 2025. Father Damian Zablocki threatened to withhold communion from a member of his congregation because the member was wearing a scapular associated with Franciscans. Okay, this did happen. I have a corroborating testimony, and I will go over that testimony after this one. In a conversation I had with Father Damian, he was speaking of a religious I know who would frequent our area giving talks. Father Damian stated that this particular religious had never presented letters of suitability to the parish where he spoke. Okay, we're going to stop right there, and I'm going to show you what I've got here, which is a letter of suitability for this religious. So let's go ahead and zoom in right there. Let's see a little bit more. Can we get a little bit more? Okay. So we've got, Dear Father Allen, in light of the provisions of Canon 903 CIC and Canon 703 paragraph 1 CCEO, and under the guidelines proposed by the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, Conference of Major Superiors of Men, Leadership Conference of Women Religious, and Council of Major Superiors of Women Religious, NCCB, November 1993, and the policies of this religious institute, a right to certify the suitability of Friar Anthony. There you go. All right, so Father Damian was speaking about Friar Anthony. Here we go. It says, I write to certify the suitability of Friar Anthony as a member of this religious institute in good standing. I do this in the spirit of mutuality, trust, respect, and common understanding in accord with the principles set forth in Mutuae Relationes, Rome, May 14th, 1978. Specifically, I write to inform you that Friar Anthony, known to the world as Matthew Ball, right here in parentheses, resides at Holy Annunciation Skeet, Burnsville, North Carolina, associated with Mount Tabor Monastery. He will be at the St. Jane de Chantal Parish in Abita Springs, Louisiana, 70420 on December 8th for a third order vestiture ceremony. I am able to make the following statements. He is a person of good moral character and reputation. I know of nothing which would in any way limit or disqualify him from this ministry. I am unaware of anything in his background which would render him unsuitable to work with minor children, respectfully in Christ. Father Damian, now don't be confused. This man's name is Abbot Damian Higgins of the Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of Chicago. This is not Father Damian Zablocki signing this, of course. This is Abbot Damian Higgins, Ukrainian Catholic Eparchy of Chicago. So what do we have again in the testimony? We have that Father Damian stated that this particular religious, that is Friar Anthony, had never presented letters of suitability to the parish where he spoke. Here we have, again, the letter of suitability. Okay, where it says that, again, he writes to certify the suitability of Friar Anthony. And it's specifically him, Friar Anthony, going to facilitate a third order vestiture ceremony at St. Jane de Chantal Parish in Abita Springs. All right, continuing on with the testimony. All right, this was a false statement, which we verified. This religious had always presented letters of suitability at his visits. These letters were verified by the pastor of the church to which the religious would visit and give talks. Father Damian went so far as to tell me this particular religious had no valid vocation and that I should not be associated with him. Father Damian even offered to speak to me and my associates to state falsehoods to intentionally damage the reputation of this religious. Okay, now, given the testimony, let's look at the canonical violations, because remember, the Archdiocese is not going to show you these canonical violations if they would not show me the canonical report from Father Jamin David. Now, I have to present these to you because no one else will. Who else will? No one else will. Now, I would call upon the canon lawyers in the diocese, specifically, Father Jonathan Hemelt, Father Garrett O'Brien, to make this right. because the laity have a right, right? They have rights under canon law, and we deserve to have clarity on this situation. So canon lawyers in the diocese of goodwill, feel free to comment, because I'm not a canon lawyer. I'm a layperson stuck between corrupt and incompetent clergy and corrupt and incompetent government. And my job is to take care of the temporal sphere and to try in the ways that I can to ensure that the kingship of Christ is respected in society and that there is good order. So that's what I'm attempting to do here. So the Gretchen Butzman testimony, we have Canon 220. No one is permitted to harm illegitimately the good reputation which a person possesses. All right, well, we know that Father Damian did that according to the testimony. Canon 1390. These are penalties. Paragraph 2, a person who calumniously denounces some other offense to an ecclesiastical superior, and here's our clause, or otherwise unlawfully injures the good name of another, is to be punished according to the provision of Canon 1336, paragraphs 2 through 4, to which, moreover, a censure may be added. Paragraph 3, the calumniator must also be compelled to make appropriate amends. So here are the penalties that can be imposed upon the person who unlawfully injures the good name of another, which is what Father Damian did according to testimony to Friar Anthony Serviam Maria. Canon 1336, paragraph 1, expiatory penalties can affect the offender either forever or for a determined or an indeterminate period. Apart from others which the law may perhaps establish, they are those enumerated in paragraphs 2 through 5. Here are paragraphs 2 through 5. So first we have an order. So these are orders that can be issued against Father Damian. So he must reside in a certain place or territory. So for instance, he could be said, hey, you're not living here anymore. You're going over here, and you're going to be a diocesan hermit, and you're going to have a spiritual director, and you're going to do penance. To pay a fine or a sum of money for the church's purposes in accordance with the guidelines established by the Episcopal Conference. Paragraph 3, a prohibition. So this is prohibitions. 1, against residing in a certain place or territory. So same concept as I described earlier. 2, against exercising everywhere inside or outside a specified place or territory, all or some offices, duties, ministries, or functions, or only certain tasks attaching to offices or duties. So he's a priest, so that would be the offices, duties, and ministries or functions associated with being a priest. Against performing all or some acts of the power of order, against performing all or some acts of the power of governance, against exercising any right or privilege or using insignia or titles. Father is a title, for instance. Against enjoying an active or passive voice in canonical elections or taking part with a right to vote in ecclesial councils or colleges. Against wearing ecclesiastical or religious dress. So he could be said, hey, you can't wear your cassock, you can't wear the Roman collar. Paragraph 4, so these are deprivations. So we've gone through orders, prohibitions, now we're on deprivations. So 1, of all or some offices, duties, ministries, or functions, or only of certain functions attaching to offices or duties. 2, of the faculty of hearing confessions or preaching. So you could be suspended from hearing confessions or preaching. 3, of a delegated power of governance. 4, of some right or privilege or insignia or title. 5, of all ecclesiastical remuneration or part of it. So he could have his salary taken away, in accordance with the guidelines established by the Episcopal Conference without prejudice to provision, blah, 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 blah. So basically, these are all things that could apply as penalties to Father Damian for what he did by violating Canon 220. These are all under Canon 1390, right? Also, well, Canon 220, Canon 1390 are related. We'll say that. These are the penalties associated with Canon 1390. Now, is the Archdiocese going to impose any things upon him? Of course not. Of course not. We don't care about canon law unless we can beat you with it. All right. 3, Canon 1389. Now, okay, brief aside. Do the laity care about canon law? Yeah, we do. We do, because it protects our rights. And insofar as it is in accord with the divine law, we must follow it. Priests and bishops are bound by it. They're bound by it. When the Pope promulgates, when he issues a code of canon law like the 1983 code, well, guess what? We're all bound by it. So it's binding on everybody. So, whether or not these penalties are executed, the canons are still binding. That's what everybody needs to understand. So in order for us to have justice and order, there has to be enforcement. But we've got corrupt and incompetent hierarchy. So then the laity have to step in and say, hey, you're corrupt and incompetent. You're not actually disciplining each other. So we're going to step in and we're going to see what kind of sanctions we can impose. That's our role. We actually get to do that. Believe it or not. It's not temporal usurpation of the spiritual authority. Learn about the two swords doctrine. Learn about the social kingship of Christ. And you'll learn this too. Maybe I can do a presentation on that eventually. So Canon 1389, a person who, apart from the cases mentioned in Canon, blah, 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 unlawfully exercises the office of a priest during their sacred ministry is to be punished with a just penalty, not excluding a censure. So the reason this applies in this situation, again, I call upon canon lawyers in the diocese to comment, is that it seems that Father Damian is using his office as priest to say, for instance, he's implicitly using his authority as a priest to say that this person should not be associated with Friar Anthony, right? And then he's going to go and speak to this person and her associates to say falsehoods to intentionally damage the reputation of this religious. All right, so continuing on, we've gone through the canonical violations. We've gone through that first testimony. At the beginning of the testimony, recall, she says that Father Damian Zablocki threatened to withhold communion from a member of his congregation because the member was wearing a scapular associated with Franciscans. Well, here is the corroborating testimony from John Caire. So sometime in 2024. All right, now let's do something real quick just to make sure we're on the right track here. So this is dated November 29th, 2023. Okay. All right, sometime in 2024. I was serving as an usher at Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Covington, Louisiana. I was greeting Mass attendees at the rear door before Mass began when Father Damian Zablocki emerged from the confessional. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen because I'm stupid. All right. Sorry, guys. All right. So I'll just show you briefly. This is the testimony I was referring to. Gretchen Butzman. Here it is. Father Damian Zablocki threatened to withhold communion from a member of his congregation because the member was wearing a scapular associated with Franciscans. In a conversation I had with Father Damian, he was speaking of a religious I know who would frequent our area giving talks. Father Damian stated that this particular religious had never presented letters of suitability to the parish where he spoke. This was a false statement. This religious had always presented letters of suitability at his visits. These letters were verified by the pastor of the church to which the religious would visit and give talks. Father Damian went so far as to tell me this particular religious had no valid vocation and that I should not be associated with him. Father Damian even offered to speak to me and my associates to state falsehoods to intentionally damage the reputation of this religious. There you go, Gretchen Butzman at the top. May 29, 2025. Here is the letter of suitability I mentioned. It's right here. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, it's all here. Friar Anthony. I write to certify the suitability of Friar Anthony. I am able to make the following statements: good moral character or reputation. I know nothing that would limit or disqualify him from this ministry. I'm unaware of anything in his background which would render him unsuitable to work with minor children. It says here, third order vestiture, St. Jane de Chantal Parish. Okay, there you go. Boom. Here is the, so this was the canonical summary I was going through. Okay, so you got Canon 220. There it is. You can look it up. Canon 220. Canon 1390. You can look that up. You can look up the penalties in Canon 1336, paragraphs 2 through 4. Blah, 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 blah. You can look up Canon 1389. So canons 220, 1390, 1336, 1389. Okay. Hopefully you got that. All right. John Caire testimony. Here we go. Now you can see it. Sometime in 2024, I was serving as an usher at Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Covington, Louisiana. I was greeting Mass attendees at the rear door before Mass began. When Father Damian Zablocki emerged from the confessional, he began to walk directly towards me and had a very stern and angry look on his face. He came up to me, pointed at the scapular I was wearing, and in a very threatening manner informed me that if I presented for communion wearing the scapular, he would deny me the sacrament. He then went off in a very agitated state to vest for Mass. Rather than cause a scene, I went and got my wife and left so that we could attend a different Mass in peace. The scapular in question is representative of a group of Catholics in our area that have pledged to live our lives in accordance with the rule of St. Francis, designed specifically for laypersons that was approved by Pope Leo XIII. All right, so you can look at Auspicato Concessum by Pope Leo XIII, where he encourages everyone, every Catholic, every person, right? Everybody ought to be Catholic. So everyone, regardless of age or sex, it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter if you're a man or woman, to join the Third Order of St. Francis. Okay, it's a papal document. I mean, I don't know what authority Father Damian has in relation to a papal document. The other problem is the violation of the rights of the faithful to choose their own spirituality. So we're going to go through those too. So the front has an image of Our Lady, and the back shows two crossed arms with wounded hands, symbolic of our Lord and St. Francis. So this is a devotional item, a scapular. I mean, like every Catholic knows what a scapular is. Those who are following the rule of St. Francis wear them as a symbol of penance and as a sign of their promises that they've made to God. Okay, they wear bigger ones, so they wear visible ones. I and others had worn the scapular to Mass in the past without incident. So the thing is here, even people in the Novus Ordo, right, if you don't go to the TLM, you know, like Third Order religious, they wear scapulars, right? Okay, great. I subsequently asked Father Zablocki to explain his actions, and initially he was resistant. He finally relented and agreed to a meeting. It began with Father again being in an aggressive and contentious mood. He insisted that he had communicated that the scapular could not be worn at Mass, which I don't think he has a right to do. We're going to go over that. But he had never told that to me or my wife, so we were taken completely off guard. After holding my ground, Father eventually conceded and, to his credit, apologized for his actions. Following this encounter, I found it necessary to leave Our Lady of Mount Carmel to attend Mass at St. Jane in Abita Springs. The atmosphere was calmer and more conducive to worship, and we were not harassed for wearing scapulars. Respectfully submitted, John Caire. Here's his inked signature, January 30th, 2026. Yeah, I mean, why are you harassing people for wearing scapulars? This is super bizarre in a Catholic context. So I'm gonna add something, a personal experience here. I was at Mount Carmel before I decided to leave there, and I saw someone I knew wearing a big brown scapular, and I was like, oh, like, did you join the Third Order? Like, what's going on? And he was like, no, Father Damian just gave me this. So, and I know someone else, I think, who got one of these scapulars. And what's interesting is you members of Our Lady of Mount Carmel, you can actually corroborate this because you were there, and a number of you got these scapulars. There's a big brown scapulars, basically given as like, you know, some kind of like recognition or award for service to the chapel. So it was okay for them to wear these scapulars, but it was not okay for those who had promised to live the rule of St. Francis, or to try to wear their scapulars. So I don't know. Weird math, very strange calculus. Let's go over the canonical violations that were present in the John Caire case. So we've got here's the John Caire testimony. Canon 912. Any baptized person not prohibited by law can and must be admitted to Holy Communion. All right, well, I don't see how a scapular prevents you from receiving Holy Communion. So I don't think anybody does. I mean, any sane person, right? Wearing a scapular. Because is this some kind of grave sin? No, it's the opposite. It's a devotional item. So Canon 915. Those who have been excommunicated or interdicted after the imposition or declaration of the penalty, and others obstinately persevering in manifest grave sin, are not to be admitted to Holy Communion. So is wearing a scapular somehow manifest grave sin? No, it's not. I mean, again, weird calculus, weird math. Canon 843. Sacred ministers cannot deny the sacraments to those who seek them at appropriate times or properly disposed and are not prohibited by law from receiving them. Oh, I've got a weird numeral there. It shouldn't be there. Okay. So there you go. He violated that canon because he can't deny communion to those who seek them at appropriate times or properly disposed and are not prohibited by law from receiving them. Okay. Canon 223. And exercising their rights, the Christian faithful, both as individuals and gathered together in associations, must take into account the common good of the church, the rights of others, and their own duties towards others. In view of the common good, ecclesiastical authority can direct the exercise of rights which are proper to the Christian faithful. How does that apply? Right? Because the Franciscan group of which we are speaking is a de facto association of the faithful, which Christians have a right to form. And a de facto association is, in a certain sense, by analogy, a canonical status. Because we are everything that is not prohibited is permitted. We gather together to seek holiness, right? A life of prayer following the rule of St. Francis, which is endorsed and promoted by Holy Mother Church, for instance, in Pope Leo XIII's Auspicato Concessum, where he encourages everyone to join it, right? So this is, of course, in the common interest. It's in the common good. Okay, there you go. And it's also a right under canon law for you to choose your own spirituality. Right. So when you say, I'm going to follow the rule of St. Francis, and part of that is going to be, wearing this habit, this scapular, let's say, right? Then that's part of your spirituality. It's a penitential thing, because I don't know otherwise, like, if you're not doing that, if you're not trying to follow the rule of St. Francis or the Carmelite rule or whatever, it's not like, it's like super great and entertaining to wear this giant floppy thing that's brown and that makes you look weird. Just saying. In view of the common good, okay, great. Canon 214, the Christian faithful have the right to worship God according to the prescripts of their own right, approved by the legitimate pastors of the church, and to follow their own form of spiritual life so long as it is consonant with the doctrine of the church. Would anybody like to argue that the rule of St. Francis and the third order rule of St. Francis are not consonant with the doctrine of the church? Anybody who'd like to argue with that, come at me, bro. That'll be super fun. Canon 215, the Christian faithful are at liberty freely to found and direct associations for the purposes of charity or piety, or for the promotion of the Christian vocation in the world, and to hold meetings for the common pursuit of these purposes. Like, this is straight up boring at this point, right? Like, of course, if you want to grow in holiness, you can join an association that follows the rule of St. Francis. And you can't be prevented from doing so. Okay, so the Christian faithful are at liberty freely to found and direct associations. Freely to found and direct associations for purposes of charity or piety, or for the promotion of the Christian vocation in the world, and to hold meetings for the common pursuit of these purposes. So if St. Francis showed up today and was like, hey, I'm going to start living this type of life, and oh, look, these other people seem to want to join me, we'll form a little like group and we'll start doing this, then he would be at liberty freely to found and direct that association, right? Before he ever got any kind of formal permission to found a religious institute, he could live that life. He could be the essence of St. Francis. He could be the essence of a Franciscan. And he doesn't need a little check. He doesn't need a check mark. He doesn't need to be a religious institute. He's free to do that. So what everybody needs to understand, religious orders don't start like some dude doesn't go to the bishop and say, I'm founding a religious order. It's like, well, you in what army? Like, he's not going to give you the immediate authority to be a religious order if you're just like one dude. It's not how it goes. You do the thing. You form a group. You live the life of prayer, piety, and penance. And then eventually, when that thing grows in a just world, which we are not in, a bishop will give you canonical status as a religious institute. Okay? That's how that works, organically. Not the opposite. It's not arbitrary. Okay? Well, it is arbitrary now, because again, you don't get to be a traditional Catholic. You don't get to, like, everybody in the hierarchy, and I'm generalizing, hates tradition, right? So you don't get to do this stuff, because even though you're permitted to under canon law, well, canon law only applies when they want it to. Right, Canon 1375, because we live under tyranny. We live under tyranny. Canon 1375. I don't know. Oh, that's my bad. I was going to cite a different canon. This is canon 528. Let me just delete that. Boom. 528. Boom. There you go. So canon 528, when a pastor is obliged to make provision so that the word of God is proclaimed in its entirety to those living in the parish. Okay. For this reason, he is to take care that the lay members of the Christian faithful are instructed in the truths of the faith, especially by giving a homily on Sundays and holy days of obligation and by offering catechetical instruction. So it seems like the opposite of this is happening in relation to the Third Order and Friar Anthony, right? It's like you shouldn't do these things that are objectively good. You shouldn't do these things that are objectively good. So that'd be the opposite, right, of caring for the lay members of the Christian faithful and catechizing them. He is to foster works through which the spirit of the gospel is promoted, even in what pertains to social justice. He is to have particular care for the Catholic education of children and youth. Guess what? Children and youth can join the Third Order too. So if you're 14 or older, basically, you can join the Third Order. He is to make every effort, even with the collaboration of the Christian faithful, so that the message of the gospel comes also to those who have ceased the practice of religion or do not profess the true faith. So what greater witness than people who choose to live the Third Order rule of St. Francis or the First Order rule of St. Francis, and they are seen out in the world, right? And people ask them, hey, like, why are you wearing that scapular? Why are you wearing that tau cross, etc.? They get to talk about the faith. So these are things that are completely consonant with the doctrine of the church, completely consonant with the mission of the church's pastors, but which Father Damian was discouraging. And in the case of Friar Anthony, he was actually going after the guy's reputation. Going after his reputation by saying, oh, he never had letters of suitability. He doesn't have a valid vocation. Okay? And then saying, oh, you can't exercise your spirituality. You can't wear that scapular. And I'll deny you Holy Communion over it. Okay, great. So what about all the public sinners in Louisiana that I'm sure we have? You're like, do they get to come up and receive communion? Does that happen? How about in the U.S.? How about the public sinners in the U.S.? Have they been given communion? Okay, all right. Yeah, they're not permitted to, but the priest violates canon law, violates the law of the church, and gives them communion. So in this case, the priest is violating the law of the church to refuse communion to someone for wearing a scapular. Very bizarre. All right, that's all I got for you today. We're going to call it. I've got work to do. God bless you. Yeah, let's try to live according to the laws of the church. Let's try to do that. And laity, it's time to buck up a bit, man. Like, we got quite a fight ahead of us. We got a mess in the clergy. We got a ton of homosexuals. We got a mess in government, and we're stuck in the middle. We got oppressors on both sides. But our job is to look after the social order. That's our job in the church. So the church encompasses those two roles, right? You have the spiritual authority, the ecclesiastics. You have the temporal authority. Those are the people who are supposed to govern society. We have a bunch of people who are not fit to govern, who never should have been in office. And that's a long story that goes back to sort of the massacre and genocide of the noble classes during World War I, because those are the people who saw it as their duty to go fight and defend their people at that time. They were still exercising their rights and duties, still saying, I have a duty to protect my people. And so they were the ones who died on the battlefield. A lot of them. And so the rest of them are diaspora, where they don't have the power that they have the authority to wield. So we're in a very strange situation where we don't have the support of our pastors and we don't have the support of Catholics in government, because we don't have Catholics in government. And we have an illegitimate government. So we have to step into that breach. Men of the West, men of the church, you have to step into the breach. Step into the breach and take courage. All right. That's it. Have a good day.